Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. The Family Council is similar to the Client Empowerment Council. We're a voice for families with loved ones with a mental illness. So what we do is we're advisors and advocates for the Mental Health Care Center. So any issues or concerns that families have with either the treatment or the care of their loved ones, we bring it up to management to make sure that, hopefully we can put a recommendation through to make things better for everybody. So what we do is we meet every second Thursday of the month at 6 p.m. And we're also part of different committees. We have input at the strategic planning committees and the patient family care center committees. So we do a lot of good work, and hopefully, if you're interested, you can join us. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you very much. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Client Empowerment Council. Next month is the start of our 10th year being at the Royal, and we've had over 75 people that have been dedicated volunteers that work with management to improve the quality of life of the clients of the Royal. And we are an advocacy and advisory council speaking on behalf of the clients of the Royal, and our members have a lived experience with mental health at the Royal. We also publish a newsletter, which some of you I can see you're reading, and there's numerous copies or numerous issues outside, and there's quite a few of them out there, so you may want to look them over and take some home and then pass them around. We also have a permanent seat on the Quality Committee of the Board and the Board of Trustees, so that tells you a lot about the Royal, where they are listening to what we have to say. And the Council also has taken part in committees at the Royal, the same as the Family Council, Strategic Planning and Ethics, and a few others. And we also participate in the Royal Surveys, which we do 2 or 3 times a year to improve the quality of life. I'm skipping a lot because I want to get to the meat of the presentation tonight. I'm going to move right into Karen James's presentation, and if you'd like to come up, give her a warm welcome.
I'm just going to start by reading a poem that I wrote that was related to the topic. So we had chosen the topic, and then afterwards I sort of sat down and thought about what that topic meant. Mental illness is not my identity, and this is called Not My Identity. My mental illness is not my identity. I am also a human being, but that is not the part you look at or the person you are seeing. You choose to see me with blinders on and fail to see me the person. And the only time you pay attention is when my symptoms begin to worsen. You don't see me the friend or relative in all the times I've been dependable. When all you see is my mental illness, you leave me in a position that is undefendable. But I have dreams like any other, and I want to rise above my limitations. Will you give me that pretend smile, thinking I can't see the imitation? You think because I have a mental illness that somehow makes me dumb, or maybe you can just say what you want because the medication makes my feelings numb. You undermine the things I do, then ask me what I do them for. You tell me what I cannot do, yet fail to see that I want more. My mental illness cannot erase all the things I want to do, and if you tried to fulfill your dreams, I would not try to take them too. Sometimes it's me that fails to be all the things that I could be, because it's so easy to use my illness because that is what you think of me. It's so easy to be less because no one expects me to do more. But eventually I have to ask myself just what it is I'm living for. And then, of course, you think I'm suicidal because I can't accept my fate. That it only makes me suicidal because then I become something that I hate. But my mental illness is not my identity. I'm also a family member. And there were times when I felt good, but those are times you don't remember. And there are things I still do well and things I've learned along the way, but you must not notice any of this, because if you do, you never say. It's like my illness stole you from me rather than stealing me from you. And try as I may, I cannot seem to ever change your point of view. But I am not my mental illness, because there is so much more to me. And all I ask you, if you could do, is realize all that I can be. I can be a friend who offers their time to help another. I could be your brother, your sister, your father, or your mother. I could be a dreamer who dreams of seeing a better tomorrow. I could be a friend or relative that echoes your deepest sorrow. I could be an artist, a poet, or a writer. I've gone through more than most because I am a fighter. I have a sense of humor because I've had no other choice. You have to learn to laugh when you haven't got a voice. So I'm asking you to consider this and then maybe consider me, because I am far more amazing than the person you chose to see. Thank you. So, when I was thinking about identity, I was thinking about how that, there are many identities that we get in life. So sometimes, along the way you get numerous identities. When I grew up in my family, for instance, one of my identities was unwanted. So that was one of the messages I got: you're not wanted. So I took that on as an identity and acted that way in my life. So literally, I became unwanted. I acted as if I was unwanted because that was the identity I took on. I think identity is extremely important because whatever we identify ourselves as, we are limited by that identity. And I think with mental illness, that's a specifically difficult thing to do to a person. Often it's a relative's labeled their relative as, in this case, somebody with a mental illness. Or, when we label someone addicted, and addiction is one of the labels that I have. I also have a mental illness. It's bipolar disorder. So I have two labels that I received. And those labels carry with it a lot of judgment. When you think about the word addict, for instance, there's a lot of judgment behind that. But I'll also stand here and tell you that I have not used drugs and alcohol for 22 years. But the stigma of that word addiction can still be applied, and I can still feel the negative consequences of the negative identity that comes with that word. So one of the reasons I was looking at this idea of identity is the two types of identity that I thought were really quite important. So again, when you have a mental illness, when you've been diagnosed, it's like your identity gets hijacked the minute you get the label. So when someone says, "Oh, this person they're schizophrenic," they have schizophrenia. They're schizophrenic, or they're borderline, or some other idea like this. And so it gets attached to them. And when a label is attached to you, you start to live that label. And sometimes it's just from, if someone is telling me I can't do this or I'm not capable of that because I have this problem, I will stop trying. Why should I bother? You already think I'm not capable of it, so I don't really need to do anything, right? I just need to just sit back and have you do everything for me because you don't think I'm capable because I have this mental illness. So that was one and a half of the identity thing that bothered me. I said, I think the label that we get from other people limits us quite profoundly. And then there's a label that we could take on, and I've seen this over the years. I work in the field of addiction, so I do a lot of counseling with people. And the other thing I saw very prominently was the other side of this identity problem was when we ourselves take the identity on, and then we buy into it so strongly that we think that's who we are. So I often see people who believe that they are this illness, and then they don't do anything themselves because they believe they cannot. Sometimes people buy in even to a physical illness. You see sometimes with people who have chronic pain, or they stop becoming part of their lives anymore. I can't do this. And we can buy so strongly into the identity that we in fact lose our identity. And so I thought identity was a very important question from this point of view. So again, and the other part of identity or labeling that we get is the stigma that's carried with the label. Nothing more stigmatizing than the word borderline personality disorder. That just throws you right in the garbage can, right? The label schizophrenia, well, my God, you can't do anything functional if you have that illness. So these are all things, and from the addiction point of view, and that's my more stronger one that bothers me, because the stigma that's carried to addiction is your life isn't worth a damn. You can die on the street because you're disgusting. You've got a self-imposed illness. There's so much stigma attached to addiction. I mean, we literally cast out how much of our society based on that identity factor. And here's the other part about mental illness. So I have bipolar disorder, but if you were to meet me, and most people that know me don't know this unless I tell them, so you would have no idea I have bipolar disorder. Now, if someone told you I was bipolar and then you met me, you might start looking for something weird so that you can identify me as that person with bipolar. But most people don't know this, and they're actually shocked when I tell them. Why? Because I take medication, and that medication works quite well, and I've done the therapy needed to be better. So guess what? You also recover from a mental illness. So how long would I keep the label bipolar? I talk about it in order to let people know that you can actually be normal and have a mental illness. You know, I have no horns, nothing else, so I look pretty normal. The average person wouldn't even know. And again, this is just the part where I say when you absorb this notion of who you are, and it's limited by that identity, you end up losing your life. And that was a bit in the poem that I read as well that talked a bit about that. And sometimes we use our illness to get away with stuff, eh? Because, like, let me tell you, if you're going to limit me by my illness, I can get you to do stuff. Eh? Oh, it's great, man. Oh, I can't do that. Could you do it for me? Well, I can't. I get anxious. I can't go to the store. You think you can go for me? You know? Like, and since you think I'm so mentally incompetent, you'll get up there and do it. So I question, you know, I sort of challenge you when you attach those labels to other people. You know, they can use it. They can, you know, and people will do it. If I don't have to get up and do anything, and you're going to do it all for me, why would I even bother? I don't do that today because I want a life. You know, I don't want to be limited by any of these things in my life. I want to be able to do all the things that I enjoy. So it's not a get out of life free card. So, you know, sometimes we don't do our relatives and our family members any service by not having any expectations of them. And I really say that to people with a mental illness too. Don't define it. Don't limit yourself by that. You know, we will be limited by what we limit ourselves by. So don't limit yourself by that. So here's the question I'm more interested in answering. You know, I could tell you a bit of my background and my history, and it's not a pleasant one, growing up in addiction, an addicted family, you know, and all the terrible stuff that comes with that, mental illness in my family. You know, mother died at a very young age of her addiction, essentially. Lost a father when I was very young. So a very difficult past to come out of. I ended up in a job, guess what? It was an addicted family. I found another one after mine disappeared. It's easy to find another family to belong with the same problems. And that could be what was going to identify me. And I think for a long time I did identify with that story, and that limited me. So today I don't. That's not who I am. So I challenge people, even if you don't have an illness, this is an incredible question to ask yourself. Who am I? You know? And you'll be amazed by how people answer that question. So I'm an artist. That's part of who I am. So this is one of my pieces. The painted face there is mine, and one of my more bizarre moments in life. I'm a big fan of Bob Marley, so it's an image I drew of Bob Marley. Just an image of a child. I do a lot of drawing now that's based on the kind of work and that I do and on the commentary that I make about the injustices and the way that people see certain things. So I use my imagery actually for my poetry. I'm also an author, so I did finally write. That's me as a kid. I was about 14 at the time, but I just finished this book and published it in December, and it is that story, the story growing up in that addicted family and what it was like. And it's not a drug-a-log or a drink-a-log. It's really about how lost people get, because that's really what addiction is about. It's not about the drinking, it's not about the drugs. It's about how lost people get, how lost relationships become, and how we just don't understand what's going on around us. The book is a journey to understand myself, and in writing it, I finally did come to understand that part of me and love the people that were in my family despite what they went through. I'm also a poet, and I read a piece at the beginning. So this is a bit of fun. I'm a YouTube rapper. I work in high school, so part of my what I do is I try to talk to kids, and if you don't speak kids' language, they tend not to listen to you.
Smokescreen. They say it's only weed, that at least you're not smoking crack. But when you smoke away your youth, you ain't never gonna get it back. And if you're looking for a plague, then this one's bubonic. There's far too many of our youth who are laid back smoking chronic. They tell me that they're bored, there ain't nothing they can do. And when your mind is clouded by smoke, I guess it's hard to see something new. It's a drug that makes you lazy, so it's a lazy mind that it will make. They think it endows them with so much creativity, but it's their creativity that it will take. But they're too laid back to get the message, or if they did, they'd just forget. Because weed affects your memory, so they'll never know what they regret. After a while, the only thing of interest is the experience of getting high. And if you ask them what got them started, they no longer remember why. But they are well aware today that it's better being stoned. But the one thing they don't realize is they are the one who's being owned. Because after a while you gotta smoke it, because being straight just feels like shit. And you can't make it through another day without smoking just a little bit. So now the herb is smoking you, you're no longer smoking it. You're like a fire that no longer burns unless the weed is stoking it. You think weed brings out the best in you, but the best in you has been sedated. And the creativity you think you have high is sadly overrated. You're just another pothead, too mentally slow to bother with. Certainly no woman wants you to be the one to be a father with. And you can look at me and say, I don't get the weed connection. But BC Bud's been around long enough for me to have followed its direction. So I know where it leads, just down another dead-end street. It's the only thing you're smoking is the taste of your defeat. And you can claim it's a miracle drug because people take it for their illness. But it doesn't matter what you give to someone who's facing a death stillness. I know a guy who wrote 32 songs all about smoking dope. And I'm left having to ask myself, just who is the dope? Because that's just pure pathetic if that's the only thing you have to say. But I guess if you smoke enough dope, that's the bed in which you'll lay. And the big thing about weed is it will hold on to you for years. You'll go around and around going nowhere because that's the direction that it steers. And you'll be too numb to that reality to ever figure out why your life is going nowhere and what that is all about. You say pot makes you feel better, but your wounds will never heal. The only way they'll heal is if you allow yourself to feel. If you're gonna permanently anesthetize yourself, then part of you is dead. The only thing you're left with are the illusions in your head. And you'll never get to know yourself, so you'll always be a stranger. And there's no use for me to be telling you this, because you're too blind to see the danger. So here's to all the potheads, their true potential never known. Their future exhaled in a puff of smoke, their life is not their own. You hope one day they'll wake up, but that might never happen. They may forever be sitting there, smoking dope and laughing. But I guess the weed is helpful because it medicates the cost of living in a cloud of smoke and forever being lost. It's just a shame from where I sit to see someone bound by invisible chains, too blinded by the stone to realize the drug is leaving stains, too numbed out from the high so that their life has lost its edge, having been conned by all the hype, so the life is sitting on a ledge, not able to see the fall until they'll free fall into the ground, not able to capture their youth until their adulthood comes around. By then it's far too late. They spent their life's best years, and they wonder why they've been left behind by those that were their peers. And still they'll never get it. They'll just light another joint, and no matter how many times you tell them, they'll never get the point. But still I choose to write this in the hope that someone rises from the smoke and thinks about their future before they take another toke.
So it actually works. They tend to listen a little bit better. And the guy that's in the picture is Wiz Khalifa. For anybody that doesn't know, he's a rather popular rap musician for youth. And that's smoke from the pot that he's smoking. So my idea was to write rap songs, essentially, that would challenge the messages that were found in rap music and sort of the gang messages, the pro-drug, the sexist messages, all that stuff. So that's what I do. I have them on a YouTube channel, and so they get access to that. I'm called Back Atcha because it was what I was trying to do. I'm also a photographer, so that's in the mountains of Rwanda. So I managed to climb up there as an African youth. This guy was just posing for us. He was wonderful. So I'm a friend. I'm a fighter of injustice. I'm a sister. I'm a compassionate person, a counselor, and most important, I'm a human being. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Peggy Hickman, and she's a new member of the Client Empowerment Council, and she will be representing the schizophrenia program. And please welcome Peggy.
When we were first presented with the subject matter for tonight's information session, mental illness is not my identity, I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's a good one. I like that. The next thing I knew, I was hearing Richard thank the 3 people who had just kindly volunteered to speak, Karen, Julie, and Peggy. Peggy? That's me. No way. Someone must have shoved my arm up because I would never have put it up on my own. Right then, as if on cue, all the self-management and recovery tools I had compiled over the years completely vanished. Fear, anxiety, worry, self-doubt, they all invaded all at once. Peggy, you have just agreed to stand up in front of a room full of people and for 15 minutes talk about yourself. You really do need help. Note to self, always be sure to listen to the question being asked. Are there any volunteers? Sounds completely different from, does anyone like this topic? I seriously considered backing out of tonight's event numerous times, but each time I thought about it, I kept hearing that little voice in my head telling me that I needed to make good use of every opportunity that came my way if I ever hoped for people to truly believe that I was mad. That is, making a difference. So here I am. I've decided to approach tonight's subject matter from a slightly different direction. Instead of standing here telling you why I don't consider my mental illness my identity and why you shouldn't either, I thought it would be more honest of me to talk about the struggle I have with not letting it become my identity. When I was first diagnosed with this illness, I was petrified. Not so much about the illness itself, because I really didn't understand anything about it, but I was afraid of what everyone was going to think of me once I told them. After all, I had just found out that I was crazy, one of those people. My solution? Don't tell them. I decided I would just hide it from everyone. I would act as normal as possible. That way, no one would ever have to know, and I wouldn't have to feel guilty about being a source of embarrassment for my husband, my kids, or the rest of my family. I could be the wife, the mother, and the daughter, the sister they all deserved. Someone that they could still love, and someone they didn't have to make apologies for. Problem solved. It would be my little secret. Well, to make a long story short, my plan didn't work. I was so desperate in my quest to appear normal, to find ways to try and hide my symptoms, to protect everyone around me, and at the same time to still be liked and loved, that I didn't realize for one moment what was happening. Trying to hide this illness from everyone else had become a full-time job. It had become my main focus. It's all I knew. I couldn't do it anymore. My mental illness had become my identity. It was time for me to rethink my decision. I decided I would take off the mask I had been wearing and let people see the real me, to let the chips fall where they may. I had accepted that I was nuts, so why should I try to hide it anymore? After all, this was who I was. So, the Peggy everyone thought they knew disappeared, and the real one emerged. The one who was crazy, the family embarrassment, the one who was a failure, the one who was good for absolutely nothing, the one who was totally unlovable. It was pretty tough dealing with the shame and guilt I felt, always wondering what people were thinking and not saying. I often felt like I was on the outside looking in. I still struggle with quite a bit of that, even with their reassurances, but I'm getting better at being more comfortable with myself. After quite a few years, several different doctors, a lengthy hospital stay, some really poor choices around how to deal with some of the frightening symptoms I was experiencing, and yet another hospitalization, this time on a major emergency basis, something happened. Suddenly, I didn't want this illness to control my life any longer. But in order for that to happen, I knew I needed help. To get that, I needed to open up and be honest, not just with myself, but more importantly with my doctor. I had to stop being afraid of what he might think if he really knew what was going inside of me. It was time for me to start believing in his commitment to my wellness. For the first time, I was actually able to, at least hesitantly, consider the possibility that there may be more to me than just my mental illness. I'm not really sure how or exactly when that hesitancy switched to definitely, but I am aware of at least two things that were involved. The first being my heart surgery. In 1997, I was diagnosed with aortic stenosis, which is a tightening of the heart's aortic valve. The stenosis eventually progressed to a point that just monitoring it was no longer an option. And 2.5 years ago, I underwent open heart surgery to have my aortic valve removed and replaced with a new mechanical one. It was sometime after my surgery that I realized that not once during that whole period did I ever think that physical diagnosis made me any less of a person. Nor did I ever think that because of that physical illness, others were embarrassed or ashamed of me. I even openly dealt with the extreme delirium I experienced post-surgery without feeling guilty about how my actions during that might have caused embarrassment to others. All that gave me a lot to think about. Something else played a much larger role, though. Most of that possibility I was at first hesitantly and later definitely considering was the result of the excellent skills of my wonderful psychiatrist here in the Royal Schizophrenia Program, Dr. Thomas Fogel. If it weren't for his genuine compassion, his constant yet gentle persistence, and his extreme patience, I can say without a doubt that I would not be standing here tonight talking to you all. With his guidance, I have gone from being someone who took her meds because I thought that's what crazy people did, from someone who was extremely ashamed of her illness and its often frightening symptoms, and from someone who really knew nothing about the illness at all, to someone who still takes her meds, except now I actually know the role they play in my wellness, to someone who accepts she has an illness and sees it as just that, an illness, and to someone who isn't quite as reluctant to share with others some of those frightening symptoms she experiences, like the fact that I hear voices. I feel extremely lucky and will never find sufficient words to let him know how grateful I am for his constant belief in me, for the way he challenges me, for the way he instinctively realizes when I have reached my emotional limit discussing what he knows is an extremely difficult subject for me, for non-judgmentally respecting my beliefs, even when I continually reject his suggestions of possible alternative explanations, and for all the positive qualities that he somehow sees in me. When I start to lose sight of any hope I may be holding on to, he never hesitates to remind me of those qualities. He truly inspires me to reach further. His enthusiasm is pure magic. It's amazing how he gets me to believe that I can be successful at something. This is a man who was actually able to get me interested in learning algebra, to the point where I really do enjoy the challenge of it, who convinced me to consider taking a course. The end result, I am now studying Psychology 1001 through Carleton University. Also, less than a year after my open heart surgery, he convinced me to try something I had never done in my life before, running. Not only did I try it, I loved it. Last May, and being almost 58 years old, I ran in my first race ever, participating in the 5K during the Ottawa race weekend. It was so awesome that this year, after some pretty intense training, I will be taking part once again, but this time in the half marathon. As I did last year, I am using my run as a fundraiser for the Royal Schizophrenia Program. Not only as a way of giving back and saying thanks to my whole day hospital team for the care I continue to receive from them, but also as an opportunity to spread a message that is very important to me. The only difference in this year's effort is that I decided to create a team. Our is PEG's Royal Messengers, and it has 2 members, me and Dr. Fogel. How cool is that? If anyone is interested in reading my run story and its message, or sponsoring either one of us individually or as a team, I would be more than happy to give you the information after this session. I have also left some information cards on the table in the foyer, which you are welcome to take. Aside from expressing how grateful I am to Dr. Fogel for the excellent care he provides me, there is another reason I thought it was important to mention it. That care has enabled and allowed me to look inward, to try to get to know the Peggy that he and so many others apparently see, to not just roll over and accept myself as the person this illness tells me I am. It has enabled me to face some of my fears and realize that despite my anxieties, despite my beliefs, and despite the voices, I can still incorporate other things into my life while I'm waiting. I've learned to accept that my symptoms may get in the way at times, but that it's about finding ways to deal with them when they do. It has enabled me to see that I don't have to be so one-dimensional. I have also tried to learn as much as I can about the illness itself. I've accomplished that by reading books, by attending various workshops here at the Royal, and during the different group sessions I attend as part of the Schizophrenia Program's day hospital, listening to some of the things that other people struggle with and the coping strategies that they find useful. Just knowing that others experience some of the same thing I do helps me to see that I am not alone. It's interesting how easy and automatic it is for me to identify them by their qualities and not their illnesses. I encourage everyone to seek out reliable resources and to educate themselves about this very complex and misunderstood illness. I work hard at my recovery. I know it's something that I will always have to work at. This illness has a way of never letting me forget that. It is a journey that is very bumpy, full of twists and turns with lots of hills and numerous roadblocks. I often get frustrated and wonder what I'm doing wrong when a new medication doesn't work. I also get so angry that my beliefs aren't shared by anyone else and feel lost, alone, and desperate, not knowing what to do in order to find what I'm looking for. I feel bad because even with all of his work, my doctor isn't seeing the results I know he'd like, and I feel terrible that this illness has robbed my family of the wife, the mother, the daughter, and the sister I used to be. Some days are good and some not so good, and then there are days when I feel like I'm right back where I started from. Those are the days when I remind myself of something I was told during my last hospital stay and never, ever forgot. You can't have a setback unless you've made progress. That reassures me that every step I take, no matter how small, is progress. I am frequently reminded that for the most part, I see myself quite differently from how others see me. This is never truer than when I spend time with my granddaughters. To them, I'm just Grammy. I am someone who loves to play, run around, and go down the slide with them, who likes making funny voices, acting silly, and laughing with them. Someone who loves to give them their bath, read, and cuddle with them. Someone who simply loves them. They also think that I'm someone who never gets tired out, but hey, they're young. Anyway, what I'm saying is these beautiful little girls who are 1 and 3 years old don't judge me. They see me according to what they feel from me. To them, it's all about having fun, feeling safe, and being loved. They haven't really learned the full concept of judgment yet, or the consequences of having tunnel vision. But when they do, I really hope they continue to see me the same way they do right now, based on their feelings from the things we do together and the love we share. As for defining my own identity, well, that is an ongoing battle. An ongoing battle to make it my own, and an ongoing battle not to allow someone or something else to call the shots. It is a battle I try so hard to win, but one that is so fierce that I still often find myself wanting to surrender. As I was almost finished writing this, something dawned on me. I realized that my identity really is my choice. My mental illness should not get to decide that it is in charge. Yes, it is a part of my story, and it always will be. It is something I can't just ignore, and it is something that I will always have to manage. But it definitely is not who I am. Now, if only I could hold on to that thought. My name is Peggy Hickman. I am a wife, a mother, a daughter, a sister-in-law, an aunt, a niece, a cousin, and a grandmother. I'm also a friend, a neighbor, a student, a runner, a patient, a client, and an advocate. What I am not is a mental illness, although I do have one. Thank you for listening.
You did great.
And you're not crazy, and neither am I, and neither are you folks either. So it's really nice. Thank you very much, Peggy. I did miss something at the very beginning of my speech, just to let you know that this is our 10th public presentation from the Client Empowerment Council. And next year, the Family Council will be taking part, so please look out for us in the middle of the winter, January to February. There's also question cards that some of the staff, some of our council members have passed around. If you have questions before the question period, which is coming up very shortly, please pass them to the front, and we'll alternate from the microphone to the question papers. Our next speaker is Dr. Raj Batla, and he's the psychiatrist in chief and the chief of staff of the Royal Ottawa Hospital Care Group and an associate professor of the Department of Psychiatry in the University of Ottawa. So I please welcome Dr. Raj Batla, our friend.
Thanks, Richard. So I have a really enviable task here. So I get to reflect on a little bit of what I heard and lead us into the question period. So I'll be quite brief, but I absolutely love the presentation. And I always learn from the speakers, and this is a really powerful event that I think, Richard, it's been our fifth year for this, fifth year, and I always get some real pearls out of it. So I like to address the speakers. First, Karen, the only problem I had with your whole presentation, I couldn't figure out what I liked better, the poem or the rap, because they were just absolutely outstanding, and if we can have another hand for that. And you talked very eloquently, as did everyone actually, about stereotypes. And it's really important that we recognize we all have stereotypes and we judge so easily and so quickly. All three people talked about judgment. We have judgments about ourselves and how much we accept ourselves, what we think others will think of us, close members of the family, the community, and what society thinks of us. And it's just so common. One of my favorite kind of things from the addiction world, and the stigma there is just horrendous, even worse than mental health if you want to start comparing. But you get into a group of people who might have problems with addiction, and you get the groups going, well, I only have an alcohol problem. You smoke, marijuana, and we're a lot better than the cocaine folk, right? So, we really just judge each other at the drop of a hat. So, thank you for highlighting that. Julie, you also talked about judgment, and I love the concept of safer staying ill. And I think that's a challenge both for people sort of receiving care, so to speak, and people trying to give care. And I know it's a really tough balance with saying, go fly, explore. Maybe at times you're going to fall down. It doesn't matter. I have faith. And you know, it's a hard thing for us to do because we're all so risk averse, from both sides. And I'm really glad you brought that out. And you're very puzzling. So anyway, well, I haven't quite figured yet, but I'll work on it. And where's Peggy? There you are. That was really eloquent. So, you know, I'm really glad you decided not to. I'm trusting you have a sense of humor. You didn't listen to that voice in your head that told you not to come and speak, because that was absolutely outstanding. First time ever speaking. I'm not sure how you're going to top that, but it was just remarkable. I loved the statement I will take with me, and I hope others will at least reflect on it, and there are different ways it's said, but I hope I have the quote about right. You can't have a setback unless you've made progress. That was beautiful, and that really, you know, says a lot about going forth, trying, and making sure you're being all you can be. You also highlighted a little bit, and there's a little stigma, I must say, about medication in general, but you put it really nicely. You understand medication and the role they play. They're not the be-all, they're not the end-all, but they have a role in the bigger picture, and you highlighted that nicely. The only part I worried about a little bit is your fondness for algebra. I don't quite get that, but we all can't be perfect, right? But thank you so much, and really, I'd like to have another round of applause for all three speakers. Just outstanding.